You gotta forget everything you know about the meta, because in OWCS, everything has changed. The funny meme comps of yesterday are straight up the S tier picks of today, and it's ended up creating one of the non-closest weeks we've had, weirdly enough. Hey folks, my name is Apostle, and this is Watching Overwatch, also known as WoW. It's the show that covers everything you need to know about Overwatch Esports. Now this week was super weird, just off the meta alone, and I don't even know if you can call it a meta because we are in a complete state of flux. What's good and what's bad seems to just be really defined by the team's personal styles, and that's making for some amazing games. And while the games themselves haven't been the closest, they have been very entertaining in their own rights. So as always, let's start things off with what the must-watch games were this week. Now, like I said, all of them were really good, just purely for the variety and expression of style we got, but for my picks, I'll start with Lazuli versus Aplom Tiger in Japan, as Aplom continues to show that they can go toe-to-toe with some of these better teams. From Korea, Falcons versus T1 was an exemplary display of both teams' strong points and also some of their weak points, but incredible match regardless. And finally, OWCS versus Twisted Minds, a game that I wasn't expecting to be great, but it ended up being very fun to watch. Now, let's get into the breakdowns, and just a heads up, these will be a little quicker than normal, as we actually have a special interview to go over, which should provide some useful insight into how things have ended up the way they are in terms of the meta. So, spoilers are ahead, and let's get things started with Pacific in a round 2 recap. This was maybe the least close week we'll have in Pacific, as every single team here claimed their win in a 3-0. So let's take a closer look at the results. 99 Divine continued their dominant run as they secured a decisive victory over Trap 12. And this win there solidifies their position at the top of the standings for now, but they are tied with Miku Fan Club, who also maintained their unbeaten streak, defeating Full House and matching 99's record with an identical +6 map diff. Antic-Odium bounced back from their initial loss as well, claiming a win over Monster Gear in an extremely one-sided match, honestly, with Monster Gear only winning a single point across the entire series. If that seemed like a stomp though, Mengong versus Fade was even worse, as Fade finished that with goose eggs across the board. So Fade and Full House, they're still searching for their first wins. But the thing is, while Full House, they can make the argument that they had to go against maybe the top 2 teams in the region right now, Fade, on the other hand, they're in a much tougher spot. The list of teams it's looking like they can beat is growing smaller and smaller by the day, so hopefully they can find something to pull them out of the rut they're stuck in. Now, over in North America, the matches were slightly closer than Pacific, as we got a single 3-1 match, and everything else was a clean 3-0, which honestly was pretty surprising to me. Now, Shiki losing to Timeless and Liquid, that's kind of understandable. Same with Amplify getting swept by Nightmare. As for Avidity getting swept by Spacestation though, that's a bit disappointing, but you know, again, it makes sense, just like Rad going up against Liquid. The 2 most surprising results though, first, Amplify got a map off Spacestation. This was a huge showing from Amplify, as this wacky meta seems to be right in their wheelhouse, with Winter pulling up on the Torb and looking great. But nothing caught me off guard more than Avidity steamrolling over Rad. This was a match that a lot of people looked forward to, given the existence of the former Rad Avidity team that we saw in Stage 4 last year. Now they've split apart, but you know, we were expecting like a rivalry here, right? Between like these 2 potentially similar power level teams. Unfortunately though, Rad got demolished. They were only able to get 2 points over the course of the entire series. The biggest X factor here was Pella on the Wrecking Ball, who genuinely had a phenomenal performance, and Rad, they did not have an answer to the Wrecking Ball comps at all. Avidity took full advantage of the metaflux, and for now, they've made this rivalry look very one-sided, but hopefully that'll change. So yeah, not the closest week from NA, but at least EMEA was better, slightly. Here, only 3 of the 7 matches were full sweeps. As we can see, Gen G went flawless, not dropping a single map. With the state of the ball comps right now, Mag is kind of on top of the world, and Top Dragon and Sana are having no problem with the double flex comps that are also strong. Sakura Esports though, they had the exact opposite week, as they didn't win a single map. It's a tough time for those rookies, as they are now sitting at a -9 map differential, but hopefully they can find some success soon enough. Twisted Minds went even with a 3-1 loss to OWCS and a 3-1 win over Peps. This has inadvertently made a bit of a smaller circle of suck, as you'll remember Peps actually swept OWCS in week 1, who then beat Twisted, who now have beaten Peps. Those 3 are looking to kind of be in their own tier there in EMEA, which kind of got proved when Peps bounced back with an easy 3-1 win over Vision. Gotta say though, fair play to Vision, as with their 3-1 loss to the Ultimates, they have not yet been swept. The map 5 curse they had, that may have been broken, but they're still always good for at least one. Now over in Japan, we did get a few more sweeps again, but we finally got some map 5s as well. From Group A, Lazuli showed up big this week, proving they're the top dog in the region with a 3-2 win over A Plum Tiger, and then a 3-1 over Please Not Hero Band, handing them their first loss. In Group B, Nyam Gaming had just as much success with a 3-2 win over Inferno and then a 3-0 over JCOT. The Inferno match was probably the most surprising to me, considering Inferno got swept by Veryl and Vortex Wolf in the weeks prior. But maybe they finally started to click here in the final hour. Speaking of Veryl and Vortex, they both won their respective matches with 3-0s, Vortex sweeping Hayabusa and Veryl sweeping JCOT. This does now mean that JCOT is mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, along with Hayabusa, and the same goes for Undercat, who gave Insomnia their first win and also got 3-0'd by Plum Tiger. This means we have two key matches next week. First, Veryl versus Vortex Wolf, to decide who's going to be the second strongest there of Group B. But more importantly, Lost Never Gaming versus Insomnia, who are perfectly tied right now with 1-3 records on a -5 map diff. Whoever ends up losing that game, they will be eliminated from playoff contention. It's keeping you on the edge of your seat. And finally, Korea, the region that some are saying might be responsible for the mess of the meta we find ourselves in. Well, it was a pretty straightforward week here too, despite probably being the closest region we had. Falcons, as always, are the exception, with back-to-back Map 5 wins against both FTG and T1. Make no mistake though, that T1 game was very nerve-wracking for the Falcons. Proud was putting on a ridiculous performance, and if the support diff hadn't been so gargantuan, this totally could have been their win on the board. FTG as well, they played so incredibly close, but they failed to close it out. Falcons, they really were looking shaky against the Torb sim comps that FTG was more than willing to lean into. For an S-tier team, you gotta have stronger performances than this. Like, at this point, it's looking like it's only a matter of time before Falcons drops a game that they really shouldn't, and they do not want to do that. Our other S-tier team though, Crazy Raccoons, they had no trouble dispatching New Era and T1 in both clean sweeps. It was a light work for them, and the same for Zeta Division, who quickly won their games sweeping Way and Poker Face. Now VEC, amazingly, they did take a map in their match against New Era, despite losing 3-1. But then they went on to get stomped by Poker Face, so sadly, they remain stuck on the bottom rung there of Korea. The worst part, I think, was that it wasn't even really a toilet bowl or anything. We thought Poker Face might offer some good competition for them, but no, Poker Face is still a tier above there. Going back to FTG though, they did clean sweep Way as well, and show that they themselves are probably also a step above. So honestly, the final conclusion I can come to is that we have a surprising amount of tier breaks in Korea. Especially in a world where hero bans exist, a 3-0 means that much more, right? So for us to be seeing that many means that there's some pretty clear divisions between these teams. Now, like I said, there are a lot of people that have been wondering, how exactly did we get here? What's happening? How are Ball, Torb, and Sim actually strong and viable picks? Well, I sat down with Cass, the coach of Incendia Esports, who's gonna share some insight on where exactly we're at. So let's go take a look at that. So I'm just kind of curious to get a professional's opinion here on what exactly is going on in the meta right now. Obviously, we have, there's Torb being played, there's Symmetra being played. Is this just purely coming as a result of like hero bans?
So what we've been seeing with hero bans, that there's not really a meta anymore. Like everyone's getting used to everything right now. So even right now, I wouldn't call what we're in a meta, because there's not one most effective tactic, right? There just isn't one. So we're going all over the place looking for different ways to counter each other essentially. And what the Torb sim does, it just counters Hazard. Like Torb just hard counters Hazard, because Torb right now, and maybe that's micro buffing over some like I think almost a year. Torb like survives everything. Like if he, for example, I think a good standpoint is where if a character gets naded like Ashe and then bubble jumped upon by Winston, Ashe dies every time, even with Coachkin. Same for Cassidy. I think almost every squishy character in the game, maybe Tracer not, right, will die instantly at that point. But Torb can just casually press E and walk out.
Do you think hero bans are coming into play at all for this? Like, if it wasn't for hero bans, would Torb still be getting played, or are they kind of like enabling him to like be the Hazard counter?
That's a good question. I think they do. I think they will have an influence, but even without hero bans, I think Torb would see maybe even more playtime, because Hazard would be a more primary target. Because every time Hazard is banned, I think Torb will fall away a bit. Still, Torb is a viable pick, because Torb also like kills Winston historically has always done that, right? But even now, even more. He's also quite good against D.Va. And against Ball, he's also a viable pick because Ball cannot 1v1 him. Ball will lose.
Right.
So yeah, I think he's and Tracer's meta right now as well. We see a lot of Tracer everywhere. Torb is also historically very good against Tracer. So in general, I think we would see him a lot. But hero bans will make him. His playtime has a little bit downtime because he gets banned quite often right now.
Yeah. So we have been seeing now a lot more variety there in the tank role. I think like in OWCS especially, the only couple tanks I don't remember seeing is like Reinhardt and Roadhog. Aside from that, I think every tank got picked at least once, right? Would that maybe lend itself to thinking that Hazard is actually in a better state than we thought and he wasn't quite as overtuned? Or do you think he still needs some further tweaks?
I think with a new hero, if they release a new hero on the powerful side, not even like Thanos powerful, right? But like powerful, then it will always happen that people are going to abuse him easily because we don't know how to punish him yet. So with Torb, it's becoming really easy to punish Hazard. So I don't know. Like I think he still needs a nerf because he's so forgiving. Like Hazard is super forgiving also in ranked. So I do think he needs a tweak here and there. I like the character design, by the way. Yeah, but to answer your question, I do think he's in an okay state right now. I do want to see him nerfed because if Torb gets a nerf, which will happen for sure, because even in ranked, he's going through the charts right now. Like it's insane. He's gonna get nerfed, and if he gets nerfed, then we don't really have an answer for the Hazard. So then you would need to tweak him as well.
Right, makes sense. Everyone seems to kind of be debating where this started. Obviously, the popular answer is just like people saw Crazy Raccoon play it, and at first they thought they were memeing, but then they saw it worked, so they started doing it themselves, right? From what I've seen personally, the first team I actually saw play this was Viral in Japan, and I have the theory that they were copying Please Not Hero Ban, who obviously were playing this comp based on their one tricks, right? Do you think that this Torb comp was like purposefully built to take down the Hazard, or was it like a meme comp that ended up being the perfect counter?
I think it was found by accident.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Or it's like what you said. It comes from ranked, right? Where or it just felt good, and then people tried to use it against Hazard. I do think it's already falling away though. So already in scrims, you're gonna see a lot more Wrecking Ball again. And just Wrecking Ball with like Tracer and Soch is already falling away.
Final question. Do you think this weekend was kind of like lightning in a bottle when it came to like all the variety that we saw? Or do you think that we'll continue seeing like a state of flux as long as like the team can like stay on top of balance adjustments and stuff?
To use some EMEA examples, we have like Team Peps, for example. They will keep opting for like D.Va shit, right? Because they have ice. So I think they will keep playing D.Va stuff. Same for Twisted, I think, if they keep like TVNT in the mix. Then you have TU who can use Chase, and you have Genji who can use Mag for the ball. So why wouldn't they play ball? That's kind of the thing. I think it can go all over the place. Right now, I am of the opinion myself that ball's actually Thanos. I really think so. So
we'll get to see a lot more like individual personality come through from team comps then.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think you're not as... it's not required of players to step out of their comfort zone in this meta. They can play what they're good at.
That's really exciting. Awesome. All right, well, that answers all the questions I had. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, hope to see you back in Tier 1 soon.
Hope so as well. All right, see ya.
Take care. So a big thank you again to Cass, coach of Incendia Esports, and you can check out him and his team there in Face It Masters. Of course, with all this being said, I do kind of need to acknowledge the big announcement that came out this week that may end up making this current meta completely irrelevant. That's right, the Overwatch Spotlight and the groundbreaking change of perks in Overwatch. Now, a lot of people may have missed this because they didn't say it in the actual Spotlight, but these are coming to OWCS as soon as Season 15 comes out. That means that the Valentine's Day weekend is likely going to be the last weekend we see pro Overwatch in a perkless world. And obviously, these perks are game-changing. The balance is going to change. The meta is going to change. Everything we know could genuinely just be flipped on its head. The meta strategies, they're basically going to need to be rewritten with everything that's entering the game. So while I would personally expect the top names to maybe be able to retain their spot through just sheer skill diffs, all these middle-of-the-pack teams and the teams that trade maps constantly, they're going to be doing that a lot more. The first weekend of OWCS with hero bans is probably going to be the most chaotic thing we've seen in a long time, so definitely just be on the lookout for that. And of course, while we're kind of in our next up segment, this will also presumably affect the ongoing Faceit leagues and stuff as well, so really, the whole scene will be in a state of flux. It'll be really interesting to see if there's any maybe underdog teams right now that can really utilize this huge change to its full extent and maybe propel themselves up to the top. But with that, we are going to be wrapping the episode for today. I know we had to skim through things a little bit, but, I'm not going to lie to you, we are potentially entering a world where every existing storyline, every power ranking and tier list, every prediction we have is just going to need to be started from scratch, as, like I said, we are entering a new era and a new time for Overwatch and Overwatch Esports. So, maybe instead of a recap, it's better to spend this time looking ahead. As always, though, links to everything I talked about can be found right down below. And make sure you check out my Discord if you want to join the community of competitive fans we have there. Now remember, the Valentine's Day weekend will be the final chance to see pro Overwatch as we know it. So if you're sentimental, definitely make sure you tune into that. But if you can't make it, there's no need to worry, because no matter what changes, I'll always be around, and that's what I'll be here for. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you back next time for Watching Overwatch. Take care, guys.